In a freezing night, a poor young woman sat by the fire trying to keep warm when suddenly she heard cries for help outside. At first, she didn't want to open the door, but when she saw a man covered in snow and a sick-looking child clinging to his side, her heart just couldn't turn them away. She brought them inside, gave them food and shelter from the storm. What she didn't know was that this desperate stranger was a billionaire, and that one act of kindness would change her life forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The wind howled like a wounded animal against the windows of the small house on Maple Ridge Road. Then came a sudden, frantic pounding on the door, sharp, desperate, echoing through the tiny cabin. Keisha froze. The fire poker slipped slightly in her trembling hands as she turned toward the noise. Her heart thudded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The pounding came again, louder this time, faster, more urgent. "Please." A man's voice shouted over the storm. "Please, my daughter needs help. She's sick." The sound of a deep male voice sent a jolt of panic through her chest. She took a step back, clutching the poker tighter, eyes locked on the door as if it might burst open at any second. For a moment, all she could hear was the storm, the wind tearing at the shutters, the snow hissing against the glass. Then through the frosted window pane, a dark shape moved. A man, broad-shouldered, hunched over something smaller. Keisha's breath came fast and shallow. Her mind flashed back to that night a year ago. Another knock, another stranger with a story about a broken-down car. She'd opened the door then. By morning, her grandmother's jewelry box and her hidden cash were gone. The police had done nothing. The insurance had done worse. She'd sworn she would never make that mistake again. But then, a sound. A weak, rattling cough from outside. A child's cough. Keisha's grip on the poker loosened just slightly. Her pulse still raced, but her fear began to twist into something else. Dread, compassion, indecision. She moved closer to the door, peering through the frost again. The man shifted, and this time she could see the little girl clearly, limp in his arms, her face pale, even through the blur of glass. "Please," the man's voice cracked, raw and pleading. "She's burning up. I don't know what to do." Keisha stood there, heart hammering, torn between every instinct screaming, "Don't open that door," and the voice of her grandmother whispering from years ago, "Baby, when someone needs help and you can give it, you give it. Don't let fear make you small." Her hand shook as she reached for the deadbolt. Every rational thought begged her to walk away. But something deeper, something human, wouldn't let her. With one deep breath, she turned the lock and opened the door. The cold hit her like a wall. The man stumbled forward, snow clinging to his hair and jacket, his lips cracked from the freezing wind. "Thank you," he gasped. "Thank you so much. Get inside before we both freeze," Keisha said, stepping back but keeping the poker between them. He carried the child to the couch by the fire, moving slowly, carefully. The girl's skin was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. Keisha locked the door behind them, never taking her eyes off the stranger. "What's your name?" she demanded. "Ray," he said, voice hoarse. "Ray Thompson. And this is my daughter Zara." "Well, Ray Thompson, you better not make me regret this. Sit there, don't touch anything, and don't even think about moving unless I say so. I've got my phone right here, and I will call the police." Ray nodded, too exhausted to argue. "I understand. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need my daughter to be warm and safe." He peeled off his wet jacket and wrapped it around Zara, who whimpered softly in her sleep. His movements were careful, paternal, focused entirely on the child. Keisha watched them for a long moment, studying Ray's face, looking for signs of deception or danger. The fire crackled in the silence. Finally, she made a decision. "I've got towels," she said, though she didn't lower the poker. "Stay there." She backed toward the linen closet, never taking her eyes off Ray. She grabbed an armful of towels with one hand, keeping the poker ready in the other. When she returned, she placed them on the arm of the couch, still out of reach. "Take them." Slowly. Ray reached for the towels, moving deliberately. "Thank you. I know this is hard for you. I know you're taking a risk. You don't know anything about me," Keisha said sharply. But something in his acknowledgement of her fear made her shoulders relax slightly. "Just slightly. I can heat up some soup, she said. That's all I'm offering. That's more than enough, Ray said quietly, beginning to dry Zara's hair with gentle hands. You don't know what this means. Keisha didn't respond. She returned to the kitchen, but positioned herself where she could still see them. She pulled out a can of chicken noodle soup, dumping it into a pot on the stove. As she stirred, she kept glancing back. Ray was drying Zara's hair with careful, gentle motions, murmuring to her in a voice too soft to hear. The tenderness in his movements reminded Keisha of her own father, gone now for 5 years. He'd been a maintenance worker at the local school, dying suddenly of a heart attack at 53. Too young, too soon. She shook the memory away and focused on the soup, but her grip on the spoon was less tight now. Her breathing had slowed. She was still afraid, but it was a different kind of fear now. Not the fear of immediate danger, but the fear of being wrong, of being hurt again, of having her trust betrayed. But as she watched Ray tend to his daughter with such obvious love, she thought maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. The power had been out for 3 hours. The only light came from the fireplace and 2 emergency candles Keisha had placed on the coffee table. The house felt smaller in the darkness, more intimate. Zara sipped the soup slowly, her small hands wrapped around the mug. Ray helped her, holding the cup steady when her hands shook. Keisha sat across the room, the poker now leaning against her chair rather than in her hands, but still within reach, still watching. Why were you out in this storm? She asked finally. The weather service has been warning about this for days. Ray looked up, his face drawn. Zara's grandmother lives in Riverside. That's about 45 miles from here, other side of the county. She's been sick, heart problems, and Zara wanted to see her before. He trailed off, glancing at his daughter. Before things got worse, I thought we could make it before the storm hit. The forecast said it wouldn't start until evening. I was wrong. Keisha studied him. There was something in his eyes, something heavy and sad that went beyond tonight's trouble. What about Zara's mother? She asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's not my business. It's all right, Ray said. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. It's just been the 2 of us since then. Keisha felt something soften inside her chest. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. I lost my father 5 years back. Heart attack. Still doesn't feel real sometimes. Ray nodded slowly. Zara's strong, stronger than me sometimes, but nights like this when she's sick and scared, I feel like I'm failing her. Like I should be able to protect her from everything, you know. You're not failing her, Keisha said firmly, and realized she'd leaned forward, her defensive posture relaxing. You're here, you're trying, that's what matters, that's what they remember. What did your father do? Ray asked. Maintenance at Jefferson Elementary, fixed everything that broke, which was pretty much everything in a 40-year-old building. She smiled slightly at the memory. He used to say that keeping things working was the most important job there was. That people could teach and learn because he made sure the heat worked and the roof didn't leak. He sounds like a good man. He was. Keisha's voice was soft now. He taught me to be useful, to help when I could, to not turn away from people who needed something. They fell into silence, but it was different now, less tense, more like 2 people sharing space rather than adversaries watching each other. Zara finished her soup and curled up against her father's side, her breathing evening out as sleep took her. Ray stroked her hair, his movements automatic, soothing. Keisha stood and walked to the back room. This time she didn't take the poker with her. She returned with a thick quilt, one of the few nice things she owned. It had been her grandmother's, made by hand with patches of fabric from old dresses and shirts, each piece telling a story. Here, she said, holding it out. Ray looked at the quilt, then at her. His eyes widened slightly. This is beautiful. This is handmade. I can't. She needs to stay warm, Keisha interrupted. And it's cold tonight. Really cold. Take it. Ray accepted the quilt, standing carefully so as not to disturb Zara. His hand brushed Keisha's as he took it, and for a moment, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Thank you, he said. For everything. I know this is hard for you. I know you're taking a risk letting strangers into your home. I saw your face when you opened that door. You were terrified. Keisha looked away, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. Just get through the night, we'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. She settled into the armchair, pulling a throw blanket over herself. She was still determined to stay awake, to keep watch, but as the hours passed and the fire burned low, exhaustion crept over her. The last thing she remembered before sleep took her was the sound of Ray's voice, soft and low, singing a lullaby to his daughter. Something about stars and angels and tomorrow's light. It was the same song her father used to sing to her. Keisha woke to the smell of coffee and the soft clatter of dishes. For a moment she was disoriented, forgetting where she was. Then memory flooded back, the storm, the stranger, the child. She sat up quickly, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. Morning light filtered through the windows, gray and weak but present. The storm had passed, but the world outside was white and silent. In the kitchen, Ray stood by the stove, carefully pouring water into her old coffee maker. Zara was still asleep on the couch, the quilt pulled up to her chin, her breathing easier now. "What are you doing?" Keisha asked, her voice rough with sleep. Ray turned, startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. I just thought, after everything you did, I could at least make coffee. And I washed the dishes from last night, folded the towels, seemed like the least I could do." Keisha rubbed her face, feeling the vulnerability of having slept in front of a stranger. But the house was intact, nothing seemed disturbed. Ray had clearly been up for a while, and had done nothing but help. "How'd you even know where I keep the coffee?" she asked. "I looked in the obvious places," Ray admitted. "Cabinet above the coffee maker seemed like a good guess. I was quiet, I didn't want to wake you. You looked like you needed the rest." Keisha walked to the window and looked out. The world was completely transformed. Snow covered everything in thick drifts, at least 2 feet deep. The road was buried, no sign of where pavement ended and field began. Even the fence posts were half hidden. "We're snowed in," she said, her stomach sinking. "Completely. The county won't plow these back roads until the main routes are clear. That could be late today or tomorrow." Ray's face fell. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to trap you here with us for another day." "It's not your fault," Keisha said, though frustration edged her voice. "Mother Nature doesn't ask permission, it's just how it is." She accepted the cup of coffee Ray handed her and took a sip. It was exactly how she liked it. Strong and black with just a hint of sugar. She raised an eyebrow. "I noticed last night," Ray said with a small smile. "You put a tiny bit of sugar in your soup. Figured you might like your coffee the same way. My wife used to do that too. Said it took the edge off without making it sweet." The mention of his wife hung in the air for a moment, then Keisha nodded. She was right, it does. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Zara stirred, coughing softly. Both adults turned to her immediately. Keisha walked over and pressed the back of her hand to Zara's forehead. The girl was still warm, but the fever had broken during the night. "That was good." Zara stirred, blinking up at her with glassy, confused eyes. For a moment she tensed, the way a child might when waking in an unfamiliar place. Her gaze darted around the room, landing on her father first. "It's okay, sweetheart," the man said softly, reaching for her hand. "You're safe, we're inside now." Only then did Zara's small body relax. She turned her eyes to Keisha, hesitant but curious. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Keisha asked gently, crouching beside the couch. Zara's voice was raspy when she spoke. "Thirsty and my throat hurts." "I'll get you some water," Keisha said at once. "And I think I have a little honey. That'll help it feel better." She moved to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water and a spoonful of golden honey. Zara took them both carefully, still watching Keisha as if trying to decide whether to trust her. "You're being very brave," Keisha said softly. "I know it hurts." Zara swallowed, wincing slightly. "My mama used to give me honey when I was sick," she whispered. "It tastes like she's here." The words hit Keisha in the chest. She looked toward the man. His eyes were bright with unspilled tears. "Your mama sounds like she was smart," Keisha said gently. "Honey's one of the best remedies there is. You'll feel better soon." As the day wore on, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. The initial fear and tension had dissolved, replaced by a strange domesticity. Ray insisted on helping, and Keisha found herself accepting, even grateful. He split firewood behind the house, swinging the axe with clean, practiced strokes. Keisha watched from the window, noting how he worked steadily, efficiently, stacking the split logs neatly. The way he handled the axe spoke of experience, of physical work done before. When he came back inside, she had questions in her eyes. "My father worked construction," Ray explained, as if reading her thoughts. "I spent summers on job sites learning to use tools. He said every man should know how to work with his hands, no matter what else he did with his life." When a draft started coming through the back door, Ray found tools in her shed and sealed the gap with weather stripping she didn't even know she had. He fixed a loose hinge on the bedroom door that had been bothering her for months, tightened the wobbly handle on the kitchen cabinet, even noticed that one of the porch steps was rotting, and made a temporary repair. "You're handy," Keisha observed watching him work. "Had to be," Ray said, not looking up from the hinge he was tightening. "Growing up, we couldn't afford to call someone every time something broke. My father taught me to fix things myself, said it was a valuable skill, being able to make do with what you have. That knowledge didn't need a bank account." Keisha made a simple lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from another can. It wasn't much, but it was warm and filling. Zara ate slowly, her appetite returning. By afternoon she was sitting up, asking for her backpack. "I have my art supplies," she told Keisha shyly. "Do you want to see?" Keisha sat down beside her on the couch. "I'd love to." Zara pulled out a small sketchbook and colored pencils. She flipped through pages of drawings, flowers, animals, houses, portraits. Each one showed real talent, real observation. Some were simple child's drawings, but others had a sophistication that surprised Keisha. "These are wonderful," Keisha said honestly. "You've got a gift, child. A real gift." Zara beamed, her face lighting up despite her lingering illness. "My mama used to draw with me. She said art helps us see the world better." "Your mama was right about that too," Keisha said. Zara turned to a blank page and began to draw. Keisha watched as the picture took shape, the girl's tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. A small house in the snow. A woman at the door, surrounded by golden light. A man and a child outside, their faces upturned toward that light, toward hope. "That's you," Zara said, pointing to the woman. "You let us in when we were cold, you saved us." Keisha felt her throat tighten. "It's beautiful, honey." Zara tore the page out carefully and handed it to her. "You can keep it, as a thank you. Dad says we should always thank people who help us, not just with words but with actions. This is my action." Keisha accepted the drawing, studying it. In Zara's simple lines, she saw something she hadn't felt in a long time: purpose, being needed, making a difference. "I'll treasure this," she said softly, meaning every word. "I'll put it somewhere special." That night, just as they were finishing dinner of scrambled eggs, toast, and the last of some frozen vegetables Keisha had found, the wind picked up again. Keisha looked out the window and cursed under her breath. "What's wrong?" Ray asked, immediately alert. "Second wave," she said, watching the snow begin to fall again. "Weather service mentioned it might happen. This could add another 12 to 18 inches on top of what we already got. We could be stuck here another full day, maybe even 2. Ray closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I need to call my mother-in-law. She'll be worried sick, and I need to check in with work." "Phone's in the kitchen," Keisha said, "but the signal's been spotty all day. Might take a few tries." Ray tried 4 times before getting through to his mother-in-law. Keisha could hear his side of the conversation, reassuring, apologetic, gentle. "No, Mama Rita, we're safe. Yes, she's much better. I know, the roads are completely blocked. A kind woman took us in. Yes, I'll tell her. We'll get there as soon as we can. I love you too." When he hung up, he looked exhausted but relieved. "She's upset but grateful we're somewhere safe. Her condition is stable for now, so that's good. But she really wants to see Zara." He tried calling work next, but the signal kept dropping. After the 3rd attempt, he gave up with a frustrated sigh. "They're going to think I just disappeared," he muttered. "They'll understand when you explain." Keisha said, "It's a natural disaster. People have to understand that." The night stretched long again. Around 8 o'clock, Zara's fever returned, spiking suddenly. Keisha moved into action without thinking, her home health aid training kicking in automatically. She prepared cool compresses, monitoring the child's temperature with a thermometer from her bathroom cabinet. She made ginger tea with honey, cooled it to barely warm, and helped Zara sip it slowly. She dampened washcloths with lukewarm water, changing them frequently as they warmed against Zara's skin, and she sang soft songs her grandmother had sung to her, old spirituals about crossing rivers and finding rest, about morning coming after the longest night. Ray watched from across the room, his expression a mixture of gratitude and something else, pain maybe, or memory. "You're good at this," he said quietly when Zara finally dozed off again, "taking care of people." Keisha shrugged, rinsing out another washcloth. "I worked as a home health aide for 8 years before the company downsized, took care of elderly folks mostly, but you learn what works, how to bring comfort when you can't bring a cure, how to be present with someone's pain. It's more than that," Ray insisted. "You care, really care. That's rare. In my experience, most people do the minimum required. You do what's needed, even if it's hard." Keisha didn't know how to respond. She focused on Zara, adjusting the compress on her forehead. The girl's breathing was easier now, her sleep deeper. By midnight, Zara's fever broke again. She fell into a more peaceful sleep, her small hand curled against her cheek. Keisha sagged with relief, suddenly aware of how tired she was, how much tension she'd been holding. "Thank you," Ray said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you tonight." Watching her suffer, and not being able to fix it, it's the worst feeling in the world. "You would have managed," Keisha said. "Parents always do, they find a way because they have to." "Maybe," Ray said, "but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out alone. I'm grateful you were here." They sat together by the fire, the silence comfortable now. Outside, the wind howled and snow fell, but inside, the small house felt safe, protected. "Can I ask you something?" Ray said after a while. "Sure. Why did you let us in?" "Really, you were afraid. I could see it in your eyes. You had the poker raised like you might need to use it. You had every reason to turn us away, so why didn't you?" Keisha was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "My grandmother raised me after my mother passed when I was 12. She used to say that we're all just walking each other home, that none of us gets through this life alone. So when someone needs help, and you can give it, you give it, not because you'll get something back, but because it's right, because someday you might be the one who needs help." She looked at Ray. "A year ago, almost exactly, I let someone in who took advantage of that. A woman with a story about a broken down car. She stole from me, made me feel stupid for trusting, and for a long time after, I kept that door locked, kept everyone out, stopped volunteering at church, stopped helping neighbors, just closed myself off." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "But tonight when I saw Zara in your arms, heard her coughing, I realized that if I let that one bad experience make me hard, make me closed off, then that person didn't just steal my grandmother's jewelry. They stole who I am. They stole what my grandmother and father taught me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let fear win." Ray nodded slowly. "That takes strength, real strength, not shutting down after being hurt. That's courage. Or maybe it's just stubbornness," Keisha said with a small smile. "My grandmother used to say I was the stubbornest child she ever knew, said it would either save me or ruin me. I think it saved us," Ray said softly. "I think maybe it saved me too," Keisha admitted. They sat in silence after that, watching the fire burn down to embers, listening to Zara's peaceful breathing, waiting for morning to come. The morning brought clear skies and brutal cold. Keisha ventured out to check the road, bundling up in her father's old coat, and returned 20 minutes later shaking her head, her breath coming in visible puffs. "Still impassable," she reported, stomping snow off her boots. "Actually worse than yesterday. The second wave added at least another foot, but I can see plow marks way down the mountain. They're working their way up, maybe by late afternoon, if we're lucky." Ray nodded, but he'd been quiet all morning, distracted. Zara was feeling much better, playing quietly with her art supplies and humming to herself, but Ray seemed troubled.
"What's wrong?" Keisha asked finally, setting a cup of reheated coffee in front of him. "And don't say nothing. I've gotten pretty good at reading people." Ray looked at her, then at Zara, then back. He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something. I should have told you from the start, but I was afraid it would change things. Afraid you wouldn't let us stay if you knew." Keisha's guard went up immediately, that old wariness returning. "What are you talking about?" "Keisha, there's something I didn't tell you. I wasn't completely honest about who I am," Ray said carefully, his words measured. "I run a company, Thompson Industries. It's a manufacturing firm based in the city. We make industrial equipment for construction and agriculture. We employ about 3,000 people across 5 states. Keisha stared at him, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "You're rich."
"I have resources, yes," Ray said, meeting her eyes. "Significant resources." Anger flared hot in Keisha's chest. She set the cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed onto the table. "So what, you were slumming? Seeing how the poor folks live? Was this all some kind of social experiment? See how the help lives?" "No," Ray said quickly, standing up, his hands raised. "It wasn't like that at all. Please let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you lied to me." "I didn't lie," Ray said firmly. "I never lied. You assumed I was just a regular guy and I didn't correct that assumption. But I never said anything false. That's the same thing as lying." Keisha shot back, her voice rising. She was aware of Zara watching them, wide-eyed, but she couldn't stop. "It's lying by omission. You let me think you were someone you're not." "Is it?" Ray challenged gently. "Who did you think I was? A father who needed help. A regular person." "I am a father who needed help," Ray said. "I am a regular person. The money doesn't change that. It didn't make the storm any less dangerous. It didn't make Zara any less sick. It didn't make me any less desperate when I knocked on your door." Keisha walked to the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her back to him. Part of her was angry. Another part understood more than she wanted to admit, and another part felt foolish, like she'd been played. "I was driving a rental car because mine was in the shop," Ray continued, his voice quiet but steady. "We left in a hurry because my mother-in-law's condition deteriorated suddenly. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't set out to deceive you." He paused. "But honestly, Keisha, when you opened that door, when you looked at us and saw just people who needed help, it was the first time in years anyone treated me like a normal person. Not someone to impress or get something from. Not Ray Thompson, CEO. Not someone who could be useful. Just Ray, a father who needed help. And it felt good. It felt real." Keisha turned to look at him. He met her eyes steadily, not looking away, not making excuses. "For what it's worth," he continued, "meeting you reminded me why I started the company in the first place. I grew up poor, Keisha. Government housing, food stamps, free lunch at school, the whole thing. My mother cleaned offices at night, and my father worked construction when he could find it, which wasn't often enough. We struggled every single day." He gestured around the small house. "I built Thompson Industries because I wanted to create jobs, create opportunity for people like my parents. Good jobs with benefits and dignity. But somewhere along the way I got disconnected from that. From real people and real struggles. I started spending more time in boardrooms than on factory floors. More time with accountants than with workers." His voice grew softer. "This weekend reminded me. You reminded me. And I'm grateful for that, even if you're angry with me right now. Because you showed me what matters. Not efficiency reports or profit margins, but people, humanity, kindness." Keisha stood at the window, her arms still crossed, her jaw tight. She wanted to stay angry. Anger felt safer than vulnerability. But his words were getting through, and she hated that. "When you leave," she said finally, not turning around, "I don't want anything from you. No money, no charity, no guilt payments. What I did because it was right. Not because I wanted something in return. And I need you to understand that." "I know," Ray said softly. "That's exactly why I needed to tell you the truth. Because you deserve honesty. Because what happened here mattered, and I didn't want it built on a lie, even a lie of omission. You gave us something real, and I owed you something real in return." Keisha turned to look at him. He stood there, waiting, not pushing, just letting her process. "I grew up with nothing too," she said finally. And I learned that people with money usually want something. That kindness from them always comes with strings attached. That's why I worked so hard to never need anyone's help. Why I've been so damn stubborn about making it on my own. I understand that, Ray said. I do, but I'm not offering help. Not right now, anyway. I'm just being honest about who I am. What you do with that information is up to you. The plow came through that afternoon around 3 o'clock, the sound of its engine and scraping blade a relief after 2 days of isolation. Ray called for a tow truck and arranged for a rental car to be delivered to Keisha's house. It'll be about 2 hours, he said, hanging up. They have to come from the city. Those 2 hours were strange. The truth hung between them, changing things in ways Keisha couldn't quite name. She was less angry now, but more guarded. Ray was more careful, more formal. Only Zara seemed unchanged. She hugged Keisha often, showed her more drawings, asked if they could stay longer. I like it here, she said. It feels like home. When the rental car finally arrived, a sleek SUV that looked completely out of place on the rural road, they prepared to leave. Zara hugged Keisha tightly, her small arms fierce around Keisha's waist. I don't want to go, she said, her voice muffled against Keisha's sweater. Can we come back? Please. Keisha hugged her back, fighting tears. You need to see your grandmother. She's waiting for you. And your dad needs to get back to work. Will we see you again? Zara asked, pulling back to look up at Keisha with serious eyes. I don't know, honey, Keisha said honestly. But I'm really glad I got to meet you. Ray stood at the door, holding their bags. The moment was awkward, neither of them quite knowing what to say. If there's ever anything you need, Ray started. There won't be, Keisha interrupted firmly. But thank you for being honest, eventually. And for trusting me with Zara, that meant something. Ray looked like he wanted to say more, but he just nodded. Goodbye, Keisha. I won't forget what you did for us. She watched them drive away in the rental SUV, the taillights disappearing down the snowy road. Then she closed the door and stood alone in her quiet house, suddenly aware of how empty it felt. On the kitchen table, she found an envelope. Inside was a business card, simple black lettering on cream cardstock. Ray Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Thompson Industries. Below the printed information, he'd written in careful handwriting, "Thank you for seeing us as people first. You changed something in me. I won't forget it." Keisha stared at the card for a long time. Then she put it in the drawer with her important papers and tried to go back to her normal life. But things didn't feel normal anymore. 3 weeks later, Keisha's world fell apart. It started with a phone call on a Monday morning. She was getting ready for work, about to head out for her first client visit of the day when her phone rang. "Keisha, it's Sandra," her supervisor said, her voice tight with stress. "I need you to come to the office before your appointments." Something in her tone made Keisha's stomach drop. "What's wrong? Just come in, please." The home health agency's office was 20 minutes away. Keisha drove through melting snow, her mind racing through possibilities. When she arrived, she found Sandra and 3 other staff members in the conference room, all looking grim. "The county pulled our main contract," Sandra said without preamble. "Budget cuts," they said. "Restructuring. We're losing 70% of our funding." Keisha's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means we're letting 15 people go, effective immediately." Sandra's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry, Keisha. You're one of our best aides, but you're also one of our most recent hires. Last in, first out, that's the policy. But I have clients who depend on me." Keisha protested. "Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Lewis, and we'll reassign them to remaining staff," Sandra said. "We'll give you excellent references. You're one of our best, but there's nothing we can do." The decision came from above. Keisha sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes after, unable to process what had just happened. She'd worked so hard to get this job, to rebuild after everything, and now it was gone. 2 days later, the second blow fell. The diner where she picked up shifts 3 nights a week had a sign on the door, "Closed permanently." She called the owner, Gary, who'd been running the place for 30 years. "I'm sorry, Keisha," he said, his voice heavy. "Medical bills from my surgery wiped me out. I had to file for bankruptcy. I couldn't keep going.
Within a week, Keisha had lost both her jobs. The bills that had been manageable became impossible. The electric company sent a shut-off notice. The property tax bill came due. The roof developed a leak that she couldn't afford to fix, so she put buckets under the drips and prayed it wouldn't get worse. She tried everything. She applied for jobs at every business in town, the grocery store, the gas station, the hardware store, the pharmacy. Nothing. The unemployment office was overwhelmed, the wait for benefits stretching into weeks, the amount barely enough to cover food. She started selling things. Her grandmother's china cabinet went first, sold to an antique dealer for a fraction of what it was worth. Then the dining room table, her father's old tools. Each piece felt like losing them all over again, but she needed money for food, for heat, for survival. The house grew colder as she rationed firewood. She wore her father's old coat indoors, layered sweaters underneath. At night, she piled every blanket she owned on the bed, and still shivered. She learned to make a package of ramen noodles last 2 days. She stopped answering the phone, because it was always bill collectors. She started walking the 3 miles to town, to save gas money, even when it was freezing. Her legs ached and her lungs burned in the cold air, but gas cost money she didn't have. One afternoon in early March, 6 weeks after losing her jobs, Keisha sat at her kitchen table with a shut-off notice from the electric company. Her power would be cut off in 48 hours. She had $17.32 in her bank account. The refrigerator was nearly empty. She'd eaten toast for dinner the last 3 nights because it was all she had. She stared at that notice, at the bold red letters announcing the disconnection date, and something inside her broke. All the strength, all the determination, all the stubborn pride that had kept her going just crumbled. She put her head down on the table and cried. Deep wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her situation, for her pride, for the life she'd tried so hard to build. She cried for her grandmother and father, wishing desperately that they were here to tell her what to do. She cried because she was tired, and scared and running out of options. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollow, empty, like there was nothing left inside her. That's when she remembered. Not a check, there had never been a check. Just a business card in her drawer. She pulled it out and stared at it for a long time. Ray Thompson, CEO, a phone number, an address in the city. For 3 days she carried that card around, taking it out and looking at it, then putting it away. Pride versus need, independence versus survival. What her grandmother would say versus what her desperate situation demanded. She remembered Ray's words, if there's ever anything you need, and she'd interrupted him. There won't be. But there was. God help her, there was. On a Thursday afternoon when the electric company called to confirm they'd be shutting off her power the next day, when she had no food in the house, except half a loaf of bread and some peanut butter, when the temperature was dropping, and she'd burned the last of the firewood, Keisha picked up the phone. Her hands shook as she dialed, her heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to hang up, to figure it out on her own, to not be weak, but she was weak. She was desperate, and she needed help. The receptionist who answered was professional but warm. Thompson Industries, how may I help you? Keisha's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. I need to speak with Ray Thompson. May I ask what this is regarding? Keisha almost hung up. The words stuck in her throat. Then she thought of the shut-off notice, the empty refrigerator, the cold house, that would be even colder without electricity. Just tell him Keisha Williams called, from Maple Ridge Road. There was a pause. Keisha heard typing. 1 moment please. The hold music felt like it lasted an eternity. Keisha's hand was sweating around the phone. She was about to hang up, to run away from this moment of weakness, when the music cut off and Ray's voice came on the line, warm and immediate and concerned. Keisha, just her name, but the way he said it with genuine worry and care, broke something loose in her chest. I'm sorry to bother you, she said quickly, the words tumbling out. I know I said I wouldn't call, I know I said I didn't want anything, but what's wrong? His voice was sharp with concern now. Are you okay? Is the house okay? Are you hurt? The genuine worry in his voice, the immediate jump to her well-being rather than annoyance at being bothered, cracked the last of her defenses. The story poured out in a rush, the lost jobs, the bills piling up, the desperate scramble to survive. She told him about selling her grandmother's furniture, about walking to town in the cold, about the power being cut off tomorrow. She hated how vulnerable she sounded, hated the tears in her voice, hated that she needed help, but she couldn't stop talking. "I'm not asking for money," she said finally, though tears were running down her face. "I'm not asking for charity. I just thought maybe you know someone who's hiring. Anything. I can clean, I can do elder care, I can stock shelves, I can work night shifts, I don't care, I just need work. I need to be able to take care of myself." "Stop," Ray said gently, but firmly. "Just stop for a second. Where are you right now? Home? Do you have heat, food?" Keisha wanted to lie, but she was too tired. "Not much, the firewood's gone. I have some bread and peanut butter." She heard him curse softly. "Okay, listen to me. I'm coming to you. I'm leaving right now." "Ray, you don't have to." "Yes I do. And Keisha, this isn't charity, this isn't payback, this is what people do. They help each other. You taught me that. Now let me show you I learned the lesson." Okay, she whispered. "I'll be there in 2 hours. Maybe less. Do me a favor and don't do anything until I get there. Don't call the electric company, don't try to fix anything. Just wait for me. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. I'm walking out the door right now. Keisha, it's going to be okay. I promise you, it's going to be okay." After he hung up, Keisha sat at her kitchen table and cried again. But this time, mixed with the shame and fear, there was something else. Relief, and maybe, just maybe, hope. Ray arrived exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes later. Keisha had been watching the clock. She heard the car before she saw it, then watched through the window as the same SUV from before pulled up to her house. Ray got out, and so did Zara, both bundled in winter coats. But it was what Ray was carrying that made Keisha's throat tight. Grocery bags. Multiple grocery bags, and Zara held a covered dish. Keisha opened the door before they could knock. "We brought dinner," Zara announced immediately, beaming up at her. "Dad said you might be hungry. We have fried chicken, and macaroni and cheese and green beans and cornbread. Real cornbread, not from a box. And apple pie." Keisha wanted to be proud, wanted to turn them away, wanted to say she was fine, she'd figure it out, she didn't need anyone's pity. But the smell of the food, real home-cooked food, made her stomach clench with hunger so sharp it was painful. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a full meal, couldn't remember the last time food smelled that good. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. "Thank you for coming." They unpacked the groceries together, filling her refrigerator with food, fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, cheese, milk, eggs, real food, not just the cheapest options from the clearance rack. Ray worked quickly, methodically, not commenting on how empty the shelves were, how bare her cupboards looked. He just filled them, his movements efficient and matter-of-fact, treating it like the most normal thing in the world. Keisha noticed he'd brought practical things too: bread, peanut butter, canned goods, rice, pasta, things that would last, things she could stretch. They heated up the fried chicken and sides and ate together at her small kitchen table. The chicken was crispy and perfect, seasoned just right. The macaroni was rich with cheese. The greens were cooked with just enough vinegar. The cornbread was sweet and crumbly. Keisha ate slowly, trying not to show how ravenous she was, trying to maintain some dignity. But Ray must have noticed because he kept putting more food on her plate. "Eat," he said simply. "There's plenty and you need it." After dinner, while Zara was occupied with her coloring books at the coffee table, humming softly to herself, Ray leaned forward. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out. I need to understand the whole situation." So Keisha did. She told him about the agency losing its contract, about Gary's bankruptcy closing the diner. She told him about the job applications that went nowhere, about selling her family's furniture piece by piece. She told him about the constant fear, the shame of failing, the exhaustion of fighting so hard and still losing ground. She told him about the woman from a year ago who'd stolen from her, and how that betrayal had made her even more determined never to need anyone, and how that determination was now backed into a corner with nowhere to go. Ray listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as she talked. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped on the table. "I have a proposition," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "Thompson Industries is starting a new division focused on community outreach and social responsibility. We're looking for someone to run it, someone who understands what it means to struggle, who has empathy and strength in equal measure, someone who knows what it's like to need help, and what it's like to give it." Keisha shook her head before he even finished. "Ray, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't have any experience in corporate." "You have exactly the experience we need," Ray interrupted. "You know what it's like to need help, and to be turned away. You know the difference between charity and dignity. You understand that people don't need handouts, they need opportunity. You understand how systems fail people, because you've been failed by them. That's what this program needs." "Why me?" Keisha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really, there must be hundreds of people more qualified. People with degrees and experience, and because that night in the storm you saw a father and daughter who needed help," Ray said, his eyes intense. "Not a CEO, not a business opportunity, not someone who might be useful someday, just people. You didn't ask what I could do for you. You didn't try to impress me, or network or position yourself. You just gave what you had because someone needed it." He leaned back. "Every person I've interviewed for this role, they all had impressive resumes. They talked about outcomes and metrics and stakeholder engagement. But not one of them talked about people. Not really. They talked about populations and demographics and target groups. You talk about Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Lewis, the actual people you cared for. That's the perspective we need. That's the heart this program needs to have." "I can't move to the city," Keisha said, grasping for objections. "This house, it's all I have left of my family. It's all I have." "The position is remote," Ray said. "You can work from here. We'll provide equipment, a reliable vehicle, training, everything you need. The salary is $70,000 to start, with full benefits, health insurance, dental, retirement matching. And there's room for growth." Keisha's breath caught. $70,000. That was more than double what she'd made in her best year. That was security. That was a future. That was never having to choose between food and heat again. "I need to think about it," she said, though her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. "Of course," Ray said, "take all the time you need. But Keisha, I want you to understand something, and this is important." He waited until she met his eyes. "This isn't charity. This isn't me paying you back for helping us. This isn't guilt or obligation. This is me offering you a job because you're the right person for it. You'll work hard, you'll earn every penny. And if you don't perform, if you're not right for the role, I'll let you go just like anyone else. There are no special favors here, just an opportunity." Despite herself, Keisha smiled slightly. "That's supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be honest." Ray said, "I need someone for this role. You need work, and I genuinely believe you're the best person for the job. That's not charity, that's good business." They both knew she didn't have time to think about it. The power would be shut off tomorrow. She had less than $20 to her name. She was out of options, but Ray waited patiently, giving her the space to wrestle with her pride, to come to the decision on her own terms. Keisha stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark evening, at her father's old truck, sitting in the driveway with an empty gas tank. Behind her she could hear Zara humming as she colored, Ray's quiet breathing as he waited. She thought about her grandmother's words. "None of us gets through this life alone." She thought about her father, who'd spent his whole life helping people, fixing things, making it possible for others to do their work. She thought about the woman she'd let in a year ago who'd stolen from her, and how she'd almost let that one bad experience close her off forever. And she thought about Ray and Zara, standing on her porch in a snowstorm, needing help. Sometimes accepting help was the bravest thing you could do. "Okay," she said finally, turning back. "Okay, I'll do it, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I do this my way. If I'm going to run this program, I make the decisions about how it operates. You can oversee, You can advise, but you don't control. I won't be a figurehead, or a token. Agreed. And if it doesn't work out, if I'm not good at this, you tell me straight. No coddling, no keeping me on out of guilt or obligation. If I'm not cutting it, you fire me. Agreed. And one more thing, Keisha said, her voice firm. This is about the work. This is about doing something that matters. This isn't about that night in the storm. That was separate. That was personal. This is professional. I need those lines to stay clear. Ray nodded slowly. I understand, and I agree. This is about the work. Then yes, Keisha said, I'll take the job. They shook hands across the kitchen table, and Keisha felt something shift inside her. Not just relief, though there was plenty of that, but something else too. Purpose, direction, the sense that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change. When do I start? She asked. That's up to you, Ray said. I'd like to bring you in for training as soon as possible. 2 weeks, maybe 3, of intensive work to get you up to speed on non-profit management, community organizing, program development. We'll cover everything. Then we'll look at launching the initiative within 3 months. That fast? The need is there now, Ray said. People are struggling now. We can't wait for perfect conditions. We start where we are and we build as we go. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to have our financial officer wire an advance to your account tonight. First month's salary. That should take care of the immediate crisis. Get your power back on. Stock up on firewood, whatever you need. That's too much, Keisha protested. I haven't worked yet. Consider it a signing bonus, Ray countered. And honestly, Keisha, this makes good business sense. I need you focused on learning the role, not worried about keeping your heat on. This is practical, not generous. Keisha wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too relieved. Okay, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ray said with a slight smile. Wait until you see how hard you're going to work. This program is going to consume your life for the next few months. You're going to earn every penny, I promise you that. But there was warmth in his voice, and respect. He wasn't offering her charity, he was offering her a challenge, a chance to prove herself, and Keisha had never backed down from a challenge in her life. The Community Bridge Initiative launched 4 months later, on a warm day in late June. Keisha had spent 14 weeks in intensive training that had tested every limit she had. She'd learned about non-profit management, studying legal structures and board governance, and financial accountability. She'd learned about community organizing, about building coalitions, and identifying stakeholders, and creating sustainable partnerships. She'd learned about program development, about needs assessment, and outcome measurement, and continuous improvement. Ray had been right, she'd earned every penny. She'd also learned that she was good at this, really good. Her lack of formal education didn't matter when she could walk into a community center and immediately identify what people needed. Her resume didn't impress anyone, but her ability to listen, really listen, and understand what people were actually saying behind their words, that made her invaluable. Ray gave her an initial budget of $2 million and told her to use it wisely. $2 million sounds like a lot, he'd said during one of their early planning meetings. But in community work it goes fast. Every dollar needs to count. Every program needs to be sustainable. Don't build something that'll collapse the moment funding shifts. Keisha started small and focused. She rented a storefront in Riverside, the town where Ray's mother-in-law lived. It was a struggling community, hit hard by factory closures and economic decline. The building had been a furniture store once, sitting empty for 3 years, windows dusty and forgotten. She spent 2 weeks just talking to people. She sat in diners and coffee shops. She attended community meetings. She visited churches and schools. She asked questions and listened to answers. What do you need? She asked over and over. Not what do you think you should need, or what sounds good in a grant proposal. What would actually help? The answers surprised her sometimes. Job training, yes, but not the kind that taught outdated skills nobody was hiring for. Childcare, absolutely, but flexible childcare that accommodated second-shift workers and weekend jobs. Food assistance, but in a way that didn't make people feel ashamed. She hired 2 staff members, Angela Rodriguez, a former social worker who'd burned out on the system but still believed in the work, and James Franklin, a community organizer who'd grown up in Riverside and knew everyone. Together they got to work. The first program was a job skills training center, but with a twist. Instead of teaching generic computer skills, they brought in local employers to explain what they actually needed. They offered training in specific software used by actual companies that were actually hiring. They provided interview preparation and resume workshops, but they also helped people get professional clothes and reliable transportation. The second program was a community food resource center, not a traditional food pantry where people took whatever was donated, but a market model where people could shop with dignity, choosing what they needed and what their families would actually eat.
The third program was childcare support. Keisha knew from experience that many people couldn't work because they couldn't afford care. They created subsidized care slots and recruited local providers, but they also created a cooperative model where parents could trade childcare hours. Within 6 months they'd served over 200 families. Real families with real names and real stories. Keisha knew many of them personally. But success didn't come easy. The first major challenge came in August, when local councilman Jeffrey Davis started raising questions about the program's funding and Keisha's qualifications. He gave interviews to the local newspaper, insinuating impropriety. "We need to ask how a woman with no college degree and no management experience suddenly becomes the director of a $2 million program," he said in one interview that ran on the front page. "And we need to ask about her relationship with Ray Thompson. Some might call this nepotism. Others might call it something worse. This smells of favoritism, pure and simple." The article ran with a photo of Keisha at a community event, caught mid-gesture, looking unprofessional. The comments section online was brutal. People she'd never met questioned her intelligence, her ethics, her motives. Some comments were explicitly racist, using language that made her stomach turn. One comment stuck with her: "Another welfare queen getting paid to do nothing. This is why we can't have nice things." Keisha sat in her office reading the comments, feeling each word like a physical blow. Her hands shook, her eyes burned. 8 months of hard work, of 14-hour days, of exhausting herself to make this work, and this was what people thought of her. She wanted to quit. God, she wanted to quit. To walk away and let someone else deal with the scrutiny and judgment and casual cruelty. Angela found her like that, tears streaming down her face, staring at her computer screen. "Don't let them win," Angela said firmly, closing the laptop. "Don't give them that power." "Maybe they're right," Keisha said, her voice hollow. "Maybe I am in over my head. Maybe I am just a token, and everyone can see it but me." "You know what I see?" Angela said, crouching down to meet Keisha's eyes. "I see a woman who's helped 200 families in 6 months. I see someone who treats people with dignity when every other system treats them like problems to be solved. I see someone who works 60 hours a week because she actually cares, not because she has to. That's what matters. Not what some bitter politician says to get his name in the paper. I just don't know if I can handle this," Keisha admitted. "The scrutiny, the attacks, every decision I make, someone's going to question it. Every success, someone's going to attribute to Ray instead of to me." "You can handle it," Angela said, "because those 200 families need you. Because the next 200 families need you. And because quitting would prove them right." "Is that what you want?" "No," Keisha said. "Then don't quit, fight back. But don't fight with anger. Fight with results." So Keisha didn't quit. Instead she doubled down. She invited journalists to visit the program, to interview the people they'd helped. She created detailed reports showing exactly how every dollar was spent, publishing them online for full transparency. She held monthly community meetings where anyone could ask questions, voice concerns, suggest improvements. She invited Councilman Davis personally to tour the facility. He declined, but the invitation was public record. And slowly, painfully, the narrative began to shift. Other newspapers picked up the story, but they interviewed the families who'd been helped. They talked to employers who'd found reliable workers through the program. They spoke with community leaders who praised the initiative's approach. One article quoted a woman named Teresa Martin who'd found a job through the program after 2 years of unemployment. "Miss Williams didn't just help me find work. She believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. She saw potential instead of problems. That's not favoritism. That's leadership. The second major challenge came from an unexpected source. The people she was trying to help. In September, a group of residents from the public housing complex formed a protest outside the community center. They carried signs, "Nothing about us without us," and "We don't need saviors," and "Our community, our decisions." Keisha's first instinct was defensiveness. After everything she'd done, after working so hard, this felt like betrayal. But she forced herself to go outside and actually listen. "What's going on?" she asked, walking down the steps to stand with them on the sidewalk. "What did we do wrong?" A woman named Denise Miller stepped forward. She was about Keisha's age, strong-featured and angry and articulate. "You're making decisions about our lives without asking us what we need," Denise said, her voice sharp. "You're assuming you know better than we do about our own community." "That's not," Keisha started, but Denise cut her off. "You come in here with your funding and your programs and your good intentions, but did you ask us what we actually need? Did you ask why the job training classes aren't working for single mothers who can't get childcare during the day? Did you ask why the food center hours don't work for people who work 2 jobs? Did you ask why people aren't using the programs you're so proud of?" Keisha stood there feeling the weight of the criticism and realized with uncomfortable clarity that Denise was right. "You're absolutely right," she said finally. "I messed up. I should have asked. I should have involved you from the beginning, not just served you. So I'm asking now, what do you need? What should we be doing differently?" Denise looked surprised, her anger deflating slightly. "You're serious?" "Completely serious," Keisha said. "In fact, I want to hire you." "Hire me? As a community liaison, someone who can tell me when I'm missing the mark, when I'm making decisions that don't actually help. Someone who knows this community from the inside, who lives the reality we're trying to address. Are you interested?" Denise studied her for a long moment, searching for insincerity or manipulation. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Full-time position, benefits, real salary. And I'm not going to go easy on you, because I need you to not go easy on me. I need you to challenge me when I'm wrong. Deal?" "I'm not going to sugarcoat things," Denise warned. "I don't want you to," Keisha said. "I want the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable." Denise looked at the protesters behind her, then back at Keisha. "Okay, I'm interested, but I'm not the only voice you need to hear." "Then help me create a community advisory board," Keisha said. "Real decision-making power, not just rubber stamping what we've already decided. Can you do that?" "Yeah," Denise said slowly. "Yeah, I can do that." With Denise on staff, everything transformed. They adjusted class schedules based on when people could actually attend. They added evening childcare for parents in night shift jobs. They created flexible options that accommodated people's complicated, messy real lives instead of ideal circumstances that didn't exist. They formed a community advisory board, made up entirely of residents, giving them real decision-making power over how programs operated. It was messy sometimes. Board meetings ran long and got heated. But the programs that emerged were better, more responsive, more effective. The protests stopped. The program grew stronger. And Keisha learned that the best way to help people was to stop thinking of herself as the helper and start seeing herself as a partner. But the biggest challenge was still to come. 10 months into the program, on a cold afternoon in February, everything fell apart in a single phone call. Keisha was in her office, reviewing a grant proposal, when Ray called. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. "We need to talk, in person. Today, can you come to the city?" "What's wrong?" Keisha asked, her stomach dropping. "Not over the phone. I'm sending a car for you. Be ready in an hour." The drive to Thompson Industries headquarters took 2 hours through afternoon traffic. Keisha spent the whole time anxious, running through possibilities. Had someone embezzled funds? Had there been an incident at one of the centers? Had Councilman Davis found something actually problematic? Ray met her in his office, and one look at his face confirmed her fears. This was bad. "The board met this morning," he said without preamble, standing at the window, his back to her. "They're pulling the funding." Keisha felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "What? Why?" "The program's working. We have results."
People are finding jobs, getting stable, building better lives. We can show outcomes. It's not about outcomes, Ray said, turning to face her. His expression was grim. It's about publicity, or lack thereof. The board thinks the program isn't generating enough positive press for Thompson Industries. They think it's too controversial. They want to redirect the funds to something safer, something more politically neutral. Politically neutral means useless, Keisha said, anger rising hot in her chest. It means programs that look good in press releases but don't actually help people. It means serving people who don't really need help because they're easier to make look successful. I know, Ray said quietly. So fight them, Keisha demanded. You're the CEO, you founded this company. Tell them no. Tell them this matters more than good publicity. Ray was quiet for a long moment. It's not that simple. The board has fiduciary responsibilities. They answer to shareholders. And after the negative press, after the questions about your qualifications, some shareholders have been applying pressure. They think the program is a liability. A liability, Keisha repeated, the word bitter in her mouth. Helping people is a liability. To them, yes. To the stock price, maybe. They see risk without enough reward. So that's it, Keisha said, her voice rising. 10 months of work, 273 families served. People who finally have jobs, who finally have hope. And we're just done. We're walking away. I didn't say that, Ray said firmly. I said the board is pulling funding from Thompson Industries. I didn't say I was giving up. He moved to his desk and pulled out a folder, sliding it across to her. I'm creating a separate non-profit, completely independent of Thompson Industries. I'll seed it with personal funds, and we'll raise the rest through grants, donations, and partnerships. It'll be smaller at first, but it'll be sustainable, and it'll be yours to run without corporate oversight or board interference. Keisha opened the folder. The proposed budget was half of what they had now. Half the staff would have to be cut, programs scaled back significantly, expansion plans shelved indefinitely. This isn't enough, she said, staring at the numbers. We can barely maintain what we have with this. We can't grow, we can't serve more people. It's what we have to work with. Ray replied, his voice steady. The question is, do we scale back but keep going? Or do we shut down completely and let all those families lose what they've gained? Your choice, Keisha. You're the director. This is your call. Keisha thought of Denise, of Angela, of James. She thought of Teresa Martin, who'd sent her a card last month saying the job she'd found had changed her life. She thought of the single mother who'd come in last week crying tears of relief because she'd finally found childcare she could afford. She thought of the older man who'd been unemployed for 3 years and now worked security at the hospital, proud to be providing for his family again. She thought of walking away from all of that, of those people losing the support they'd come to depend on. We keep going, she said, her voice hard. But I need to be the one to tell the staff, and the community. They deserve to hear it from me, not from a press release. Agreed, Ray said. I'll handle the legal formation of the non-profit and the initial funding transfer. You handle everything else. The community meeting was 2 days later. Keisha stood in front of a packed room, over 100 people crammed into the community center, and explained that the program was being cut. The reaction was immediate and angry. Who's being laid off? Someone called out. Keisha had spent 2 sleepless nights making that decision, running numbers over and over, trying to find a way to keep everyone. No one. We're all taking pay cuts instead, including me. Significant cuts. We'd rather keep the team together and make less money than lose people who know this work. How much of a cut? Denise asked from the front row, her voice sharp. 40%, Keisha said, and heard the room gasp. It's voluntary. Anyone who can't afford it can leave with my blessing and an excellent reference. But anyone who stays, we're all taking the same cut. No exceptions. What about the programs? Someone else asked. The job training. We're keeping it, but reducing the hours and class offerings. We'll have to focus on the most in-demand skills, the ones with the highest placement rates, the childcare. That's non-negotiable, Keisha said firmly, her voice allowing no argument. The child care stays at full capacity. That's the foundation everything else builds on. We'll cut other things first. The food center staying open, but will need more volunteers. More donated food. More community involvement. The questions kept coming, hard and searching. Keisha answered each one honestly, even when the answer was "I don't know yet," or "we'll have to figure it out as we go. This is going to be really hard." After the meeting, as people filed out in small groups talking quietly among themselves, Denise approached her. "That took guts," she said simply. "It took necessity," Keisha replied, exhaustion evident in her voice. "No," Denise insisted, "it took guts. You could have walked away. Ray offered you an out, probably. Take a position with the company, a comfortable corporate job. Nobody would have blamed you for taking it. But you stayed. Where else would I go?" Keisha said, "This is the work that matters. These are the people who matter. I can't just walk away because it got hard." "A lot of people would," Denise said. "A lot of people do." Over the next 3 months Keisha worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. 16-hour days became normal. She wrote grant proposals until her eyes burned and her hands cramped. She met with potential donors, telling the story of the program over and over, making the case for why it mattered. She learned to be comfortable asking for money, something that had always felt wrong to her. She learned to make the case without apologizing, without diminishing the value of the work. She cut costs wherever possible, negotiating with vendors, finding creative solutions, stretching every dollar until it screamed. She learned basic grant accounting, taught herself nonprofit financial management, became fluent in the language of outcomes and impact. The staff rallied in ways that humbled her. Angela took on extra duties without complaint, working longer hours at reduced pay. James organized fundraising events in the community, leveraging his relationships to bring in resources. Denise used her networks to connect them with funding sources they didn't know existed. Nobody quit, not one person. Slowly, painfully, they rebuilt. A regional foundation awarded them a $50,000 grant. A local church donated their community room for evening classes, saving them rental costs. Business owners stepped up with internship opportunities and hiring commitments. Individual donors, many of them people who'd been helped by the program, contributed what they could, $20 here, $50 there, small amounts that added up to something meaningful. It wasn't easy. There were weeks when Keisha wasn't sure they'd make payroll, when she lay awake at night running numbers and coming up short. There were moments when she wanted to give up, when the weight of responsibility felt crushing. But every time she felt herself breaking, she'd think of that night in the storm. She'd think of how close she'd come to turning Ray and Zara away, to letting fear keep that door closed. She'd think of how opening that door had changed everything, had led her to this work, these people, this purpose. And she'd keep going. By the end of 6 months they'd stabilized, the budget was balanced, the programs were running. They weren't growing, not yet, but they were surviving. And survival was its own kind of victory. 8 months after the funding crisis, Keisha found herself in a very different kind of room. She was sitting in a hearing chamber at the state capitol building, waiting to testify before a legislative committee considering a statewide community support initiative. Ray had called her 3 weeks ago. "There's a bill being proposed that would allocate state funds for community programs. The committee wants to hear from people actually doing the work, not just consultants or academics." "I gave them your name. I've never testified before," Keisha had said, panic rising. "I don't know how to talk to legislators." "You know how to talk to people," Ray had countered. "That's all legislators are. People. Tell them what you know. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them why it matters. That's all you need to do." Now sitting in the witness chair, Keisha wasn't so sure. The committee members sat in a semicircle above her, their faces impassive. The room felt formal, intimidating, designed to make regular people feel small. "Miss Williams," the committee chair said, looking down at her through reading glasses. "You have 5 minutes. Please begin." Keisha looked down at her prepared remarks, the careful testimony she'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Then she pushed the paper aside. "My name is Keisha Williams," she said, looking up at the committee members. 2 years ago, I was about to lose everything. I'd lost my jobs, couldn't pay my bills, was running out of options. I know what it's like to be desperate. I know what it's like to need help, and not know where to find it. I know what it's like to feel like the system has given up on you. She told them about the Community Bridge Initiative. Not the statistics, though she had those memorized. Not the budget numbers, though she knew them by heart. She told them about people. She told them about Teresa Martin, a single mother of 3 who'd been unemployed for 2 years after her factory closed. How Teresa had come to them defeated, convinced she'd never work again. How the program had helped her get training in medical billing, had helped her get professional clothes for interviews, had provided childcare, so she could attend classes. How Teresa now worked full-time at the regional medical center, providing for her family with dignity. She told them about James Patterson, a veteran struggling with PTSD who'd been homeless for 18 months. How the program had connected him with mental health services and stable housing. How he now worked as a peer counselor, helping other veterans navigate the same systems that had failed him. She told them about Maya Bennett, a teenager who dropped out of school to care for her younger siblings after her mother's death. How the program had provided child care support so Maya could return to school. How Maya was now on track to graduate, the first in her family to earn a diploma. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet, Keisha said, her voice growing stronger. These are people, real people with names and stories and dreams. And what they need isn't charity. They don't need people feeling sorry for them. They need opportunity. They need someone to believe in them when they've stopped believing in themselves. They need a system that sees their potential instead of just their problems. One of the committee members, a stern-looking woman in her 60s named Senator Patricia Morrison, leaned forward. Miss Williams, I've read the reports about your program. I've also read the criticism. Some say you're unqualified for this position, that you lack the educational credentials and professional experience typically required for a director-level role. How do you respond to that? Keisha met her eyes without flinching. They're right, Senator. I don't have a college degree. I don't have an MBA or a master's in social work. I don't have years of management training or nonprofit leadership experience. She paused. But I have something that matters more. I've lived it. I know what it's like to need help and be treated like I'm lazy or looking for a handout. I know what it's like to be judged before anyone knows my story. I know what it's like to work 2 jobs and still not have enough, to make hard choices between food and medicine, between heat and rent. Her voice grew passionate. And I know what it's like when someone finally treats you with dignity and respect. When someone sees you as a person with potential instead of a problem to be solved, that's the qualification that matters. Not the degree on my wall, but the understanding in my heart.
The room was silent. Then another committee member spoke, a younger man who'd been taking notes throughout. What would you do with state funding if this bill passes? How would you ensure accountability and responsible use of taxpayer money? Keisha had answers ready. She talked about transparent budgeting and regular public reporting. She talked about community oversight boards that included the people being served, not just agency directors and philanthropists. She talked about measuring success not just in numbers served, but in lives actually changed, in jobs actually obtained, in stability actually achieved. She talked about sustainability and partnership with local resources. She talked about scalability and replication models. She talked about cost-effectiveness and return on investment, proving she understood the business side even if she hadn't learned it in a classroom. When her 5 minutes were up, the chair asked if she'd stay for questions. The questions lasted another 45 minutes. They were hard questions, probing questions, but Keisha answered each one honestly, admitting when she didn't know something, explaining her reasoning when she did. When it was finally over, as Keisha gathered her things with shaking hands, several committee members approached her. Senator Morrison was among them. That was powerful testimony, she said, her stern expression softening slightly. You gave us a lot to think about. Thank you, Senator, Keisha said. I've seen a lot of programs come and go in my 20 years on this committee. Morrison continued. Most of them are run by people who've never experienced what they're trying to fix. They mean well, God bless them, but they don't understand. They design programs for the people they imagine, not the people who actually exist. You understand, don't lose that as you grow. Don't let success distance you from the people you serve. I won't, Keisha promised. I can't, they're why I do this. 3 months later, the state passed the Community Support and Opportunity Act, allocating $15 million for programs modeled on the Community Bridge Initiative. It wasn't everything advocates had hoped for, but it was a significant start. The money would fund similar programs in 10 communities across the state. Ray called Keisha the day the governor signed the bill into law. "You did it," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, the pride. "We did it," she corrected, though she was smiling too. "None of this happens without you believing in it first, without you taking the risk." "I believed in you," Ray said. "There's a difference. I provided resources. You provided the vision, the heart, the execution. This is your achievement, Keisha. Own it." For the first time in her life, Keisha did. She let herself feel proud, let herself acknowledge that she'd done something significant, something that would outlast her, something that mattered. She hung up the phone and sat in her office, looking at the photos on her wall. Teresa and her children at her graduation from the medical billing program. James in his peer counselor uniform. Maya in her cap and gown, diploma held high. This was why she did it. This was what mattered. And she was just getting started. Winter returned to Maple Ridge Road, bringing with it another heavy snowstorm. 2 years had passed since that first desperate night, when Ray and Zara had knocked on her door. Keisha stood in her kitchen, now warm and well lit, preparing hot chocolate and cookies for the Community Advisory Board meeting, scheduled for that afternoon. She glanced out the window at the falling snow and smiled, remembering. The last 2 years had transformed her life completely. The house had been repaired and improved, though she'd been careful to maintain its character, its history. Her grandmother's quilt still lay on the couch. Her father's tools were back, bought from the person she'd sold them to, a symbolic gesture that meant more than the money it cost. She'd hired 6 full-time staff now, plus a dozen part-timers. The program had expanded to 4 locations across 3 counties. She had stability, purpose, respect. She'd been invited to speak at conferences, had been interviewed for national publications, had become something of an expert in her field. More importantly, she had hope. Real sustainable hope that the work would continue, would grow, would help more people. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Ray and Zara, both bundled against the cold. Zara was 9 now, nearly 10, tall and confident and beautiful. She rushed forward to hug Keisha with the unself-conscious affection of a child who'd never doubted her welcome. "Miss Keisha, look," she held up a folder. "I got first place in the regional art competition. The assignment was to draw someone who changed your life." She opened the folder. Inside was a stunning piece, far more sophisticated than the simple drawing she'd given Keisha 2 years ago. It showed the same scene, the house in the snow, the door opening, but rendered with real artistic skill now. And it showed more people gathering, hands reaching out to each other, a chain of connection spreading outward from that single open door. Light spilling out into darkness, hope spreading from person to person. "It's everyone you've helped," Zara explained, pointing to different figures in the drawing. "All the people who found a door that was open when they needed it. My teacher asked about it, and I told her the whole story. She cried, Miss Keisha. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard." Keisha felt tears prick her own eyes. "Honey, this is incredible. You've become such a talented artist. She wants to be an art therapist someday," Ray said proudly, his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She says she wants to help kids express their feelings through art like you helped us that night." "That night we helped each other," Keisha said. "I needed you as much as you needed me. I just didn't know it yet." They stayed for hot chocolate and cookies, talking about the program's expansion plans, about Zara's upcoming art show at school, about Ray's mother-in-law, who'd passed away peacefully 6 months ago with family around her. "She talked about you near the end," Ray said quietly while Zara was in the other room. "About the woman who'd saved us in the storm. She never got to meet you, but she felt like she knew you from our stories. She said you reminded her of her daughter, Zara's mother. Said you both had the same kind of strength." "I wish I could have met her," Keisha said. "She knew that. It meant something to her, that you cared enough to wish it." When they prepared to leave, as Ray and Zara bundled back into their coats, Ray paused at the door. He looked around the house, taking it in, then back at Keisha. "That night," he said quietly, while Zara was already heading to the car, "when you opened this door, I was at the lowest point of my life. I felt like I was failing as a father, failing at everything that mattered. My mother-in-law was dying, my daughter was sick, we were trapped in a storm. I felt completely helpless." He met Keisha's eyes. "And then you showed me kindness without conditions. No judgment, no expectations, no angle, just humanity, just one person helping another because it was needed. You changed more than you know," he continued. "Not just for us, though you did change us, but for hundreds of people now, maybe thousands, if this keeps growing. All because you opened a door, you gave me the chance to help them," Keisha said. "The resources, the platform, the opportunity." "No," Ray said firmly, a trace of frustration in his voice. "I gave you a platform. Everything else, that was all you. Your courage when people questioned your qualifications. Your determination when funding got cut. Your refusal to give up even when things got hard. Your insistence on doing it right, even when doing it easy would have been simpler. That was you, Keisha. Own it." After they left, Keisha stood at her window, watching the snow fall. Board members began arriving, parking along the street, walking carefully through the snow to her door. Denise came first, carrying a box of folders and her laptop. She'd become Keisha's right hand, her truth teller, her partner in making the work actually serve the people who needed it. Angela followed, laughing at something James had said as they walked up together. More people streamed in, community members and staff and volunteers. Some she knew well, others she was just getting to know. Her small house filled with voices, with energy, with purpose. The meeting was productive. They reviewed expansion plans for 2 more communities. They discussed a new partnership with the community college to create career pathways. They debated the pros and cons of different funding strategies. Denise challenged every assumption, making them think harder about every decision. Angela brought data that informed their choices. James kept them grounded in community feedback. And Keisha facilitated it all, drawing out quiet voices, mediating disagreements, keeping them focused on what mattered, the people they served. After everyone left, Keisha cleaned up in the quiet house. She paused at the drawing Zara had given her 2 years ago, now framed on the wall. She'd hung the new one beside it, a visual representation of growth and change. 2 years apart, they showed the same moment but with expanding impact. The first simple and immediate. The second complex and reaching outward. She thought about her grandmother, wondered what she'd think of all this. Probably she'd say it was exactly what was supposed to happen. That opening doors was what their family did. That kindness was never wasted, just sometimes it took time to see the results. Keisha turned off the lights and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a site visit to one of the other locations, a conference call with potential funders, an interview with someone who needed help. And she'd be ready, because she'd learned something important that night in the storm, something that had been reinforced every day since, that helping others wasn't about having everything figured out. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers, or never making mistakes. It was about showing up, doing what you could with what you had. Being willing to try even when you might fail, seeing people as they were, not as problems to be solved, but as humans deserving of dignity and opportunity. All it took was someone willing to say yes when everything in you wanted to say no. Someone willing to see people first, and circumstances second. Someone willing to believe that we all deserve a warm place to wait out the storm. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that one small act of kindness, that one door opened on one desperate night, could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagined. It could change a life, inspire a mission, transform a community, influence policy, create opportunity for hundreds or thousands of people, all because someone was brave enough to open a door. As Keisha drifted off to sleep, she smiled, knowing that tomorrow she'd keep that door open wide. Because that's what doors were for, not to keep people out, but to let them in. And every person who walked through that door carried the potential to change the world, if only someone would give them the chance. That was the work, that was the calling, that was what mattered. And Keisha Williams, the woman who'd almost let fear keep her door closed, would spend the rest of her life making sure other doors stayed open. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply be there when someone needs us. To offer shelter from the storm, in whatever form that takes. To believe in people's potential when they've stopped believing in themselves. To give them a chance when everyone else has given up. That was the lesson of that snowy night. That was the truth she carried forward.
And it all started with one simple choice: to open the door.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.